Two black twins walk into a bar, just trying to enjoy a night out, until cops threaten them, not knowing one is a Navy SEAL commander and the other a police captain. What happens next will leave the entire city in shock. Let's continue this story. The night was thick with tension, neon lights flickering over the wet streets as the low hum of a city that never sleeps echoed from every corner. Inside a crowded downtown bar, laughter mixed with the clinking of glasses, but in one dim corner, two figures sat silently, nursing their drinks with a calm that didn't belong in a place like this. They looked like ordinary patrons at first glance, sharp-dressed, quiet, and seemingly unremarkable. But looks could be deceiving, and tonight, the city was about to learn just how dangerous ordinary could be. Marcus and Malcolm were twins, identical in every way, down to the faint scar above their left eyebrows, a mark from a childhood mischief that had gone spectacularly wrong. But their paths in life had diverged in a way most people couldn't imagine. Marcus was a decorated Navy SEAL commander, known for taking impossible missions and returning alive when others wouldn't. Malcolm, meanwhile, had climbed the ranks of the city police force faster than anyone thought possible, earning the rare and prestigious title of captain before most officers even dreamed of it. On any normal day, their dual presence might have gone unnoticed, just two faces among thousands. But tonight, fate had thrown a match into a powder keg. It began with a careless joke. One of the bartenders, new and overly confident, thought he could impress his friends by pointing at the twins and saying something that should have stayed inside his head. "Hey, you two think you're tough? Maybe we should see how you handle real authority." The words weren't even fully out before the tension in the room shifted. A pair of uniformed police officers, called to the bar for an unrelated disturbance, overheard the comment. Their eyes locked on Marcus and Malcolm with suspicion, their hands instinctively moving toward their belts. Marcus noticed immediately. His instincts were honed over years of life-or-death situations, and he felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before confrontation. He stayed calm, letting Malcolm subtly shift in his seat so that the other's identity wouldn't be immediately obvious. Malcolm, for his part, recognized the flashing badge insignia through the low light and understood this would escalate quickly if handled incorrectly. Neither of them moved too fast. Neither of them wanted to reveal their identities yet. The first officer approached, a man with a thick neck and a swagger that suggested he had never been challenged in his life. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, voice dripping with false charm. "Heard there might be some trouble. Mind if we check?" He waved his flashlight, the beam slicing through the smoky air. Marcus kept his hands visible, a gesture of peace, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. Malcolm mirrored him, subtly nudging his shoulder to signal the other that patience was key. "Is there a problem, officers?" Marcus's voice was smooth, controlled, with a calm that could either soothe or terrify depending on how it was received. The first officer's eyes narrowed. "Just routine. We got reports of suspicious activity. I need to see some ID." Malcolm leaned slightly forward, voice firm but polite. "Everything is in order here. Perhaps you could tell me what the report says?" That question, simple as it was, seemed to confuse the officers for a split second. They weren't used to being questioned by the people they considered lesser. Their arrogance made them blind to the danger sitting quietly before them. The tension mounted. Regulars at the bar sensed it immediately, the murmur of conversation dying down as everyone's attention shifted. Glasses froze midair, music seemed to pause, and the city noise outside became a distant echo. These two men, seemingly ordinary twins, radiated an unspoken authority that didn't require a badge, uniform, or title. Though, unknown to the officers, each had both in the most extreme forms possible. Then it happened. One officer, impatience winning over caution, reached toward Marcus in a move meant to intimidate. Instantly, Marcus's hand snapped up, not with violence, but with a precise, professional warning stance that any trained operative would recognize. Malcolm's eyes met the officers, calm but with a silent promise, "Back off." The officers froze, caught between disbelief and rising fear, as they suddenly realized that these men were not ordinary civilians. The air seemed to hum with potential energy, a storm ready to break. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Marcus said, low enough that only the officers could hear. There was no threat in his words, only truth, And yet that truth carried the weight of someone who had stared death in the face countless times. The younger of the two officers laughed nervously, trying to mask his discomfort. "Yeah, well, you don't scare me," he blustered, though his hand twitched near his weapon. Malcolm leaned back slightly, voice smooth but deadly serious. "Try to scare us, and you'll regret it. We've handled situations far worse than this. Far worse." The officer's eyes darted between the two, panic beginning to creep in as subtle movements hinted at training, discipline, and power that wasn't apparent at first glance. The twins, identical yet commanding in different ways, were a paradox. One exuded the quiet dominance of a military elite, the other the authoritative control of a law enforcer who could dismantle a situation with words alone. What should have been a routine check was now a powder keg, and the twins, sensing the officer's hesitation, decided to let them stew in their own uncertainty a little longer. They didn't need to fight, not yet. Sometimes, the mere possibility of what someone could do was enough to turn the tide. Marcus sipped his drink calmly. Malcolm kept his hands visible, and the officers felt the walls closing in without understanding why. No one in the bar could have predicted what would come next, a sequence of events so quick and so precise that it would leave everyone reeling, unaware that the city's fate had narrowly avoided a public scandal. One wrong move, one snap decision, and what began as a minor misunderstanding could have ended in tragedy. But tonight, fate had chosen to play a different game, and Marcus and Malcolm were ready to rewrite the rules. The officers hesitated, their confidence wavering in the dim glow of the bar's neon lights. Marcus and Malcolm's calmness wasn't ordinary. It was the kind of serenity that only comes from knowing you've faced death countless times and walked away, unshaken. One of the officers, the younger one, tried to regain control. "We need ID. Now," he barked, though the edge in his voice had dulled, replaced with uncertainty. Marcus's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and precise, noting every micro-expression, every twitch of his fingers. "You've got it wrong," Marcus said smoothly. "There's no reason for this escalation. You're making assumptions." The words were polite, yet carried an unspoken authority. Malcolm leaned slightly forward, his presence calm but commanding. "Step back and think," he added. "You don't want to make a mistake you can't undo." That sentence, simple as it seemed, hung in the air like a warning bell. The younger officer's hand twitched near his holster. He didn't notice Malcolm's subtle shift, the tiny movement that placed him in perfect defensive stance without any aggressive gesture. In the military, they called it the ready posture, the one that says, "I can neutralize you before you even move." Marcus mirrored him on the other side, silent, still, a statue of lethal potential. For a moment, the officers simply stared, the bar falling silent as the tension mounted. Regulars whispered behind their drinks, unsure if they should intervene or stay hidden. The bartender, who had started this chaos with his careless comment, had retreated to the back, realizing far too late that he had lit a fuse he couldn't control. Then, in an almost instinctive act, the younger officer reached for his radio. The older one gripped his partner's arm. They were trained to respond to threats, but neither of them had anticipated this. They were used to compliance, fear, or intimidation, but never the quiet, unshakable dominance of people who could, at a moment's notice, turn any situation into a nightmare. Marcus's gaze locked on the officer reaching for the radio, and in one subtle motion, his hand moved toward his own jacket. It wasn't a weapon, not yet, but the movement suggested preparation. The officer froze, realizing too late that he had underestimated the twins. Malcolm's voice cut through the silence. "Do you want to find out what happens when you make a mistake like this?" It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. The older officer's eyes flicked toward Marcus, seeking some reassurance that the situation wasn't spiraling out of control. He found none. Instead, he saw two identical men, calm as the ocean before a storm, radiating a kind of authority that didn't need a badge to be recognized. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, without a word, the twins moved. Not aggressively, but with a precision that came from years of discipline. Marcus shifted slightly, blocking the officer's line to the bartender, while Malcolm's posture subtly constrained the younger officer's movement. The officers felt the invisible walls closing in, every instinct screaming that these men were not ordinary. Panic replaced arrogance. It was then that Marcus decided to test the waters. He raised his hand, not as a threat, but as a signal. "We don't want trouble, but we also don't tolerate it," he said. The words, calm yet sharp, carried the weight of someone who had stared into chaos and walked out unscathed. The younger officer swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming on his brow. He had been trained to command respect, but here, respect was irrelevant. The twins' presence demanded obedience without a single order. Malcolm leaned slightly closer, voice low but clear. "Walk away. Right now." There was no yelling, no aggression, just an unshakable calm that made the officers' knees feel like jelly. For the first time that night, they realized they were outmatched not by force, but by pure competence, experience, and presence. The twins exuded a confidence that only came from years of life or death experiences, from facing danger head-on and surviving when others wouldn't. The officers took a half step back, uncertainty clouding their eyes. It was the first moment they had truly considered the consequences of their actions. Marcus sipped his drink again, slow and deliberate, the motion casual but full of unspoken power. Malcolm's gaze never wavered, holding the younger officer in a silent standoff. The bar, meanwhile, had gone completely still, patrons frozen, some holding their breaths as if even breathing too loudly might trigger a disaster. Then, as if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it casually, a subtle signal to Malcolm. It was a message from a high-ranking contact, confirming a new assignment, but its timing could not have been more perfect. It allowed them to pivot from confrontation to subtle revelation without creating chaos. Marcus tapped his fingers lightly on the glass, the rhythm almost hypnotic. Malcolm tilted his head slightly, and the officers noticed something odd, a faint insignia on Marcus's jacket, just visible enough to catch the light. It was subtle, but it spoke volumes to anyone who knew what to look for. Navy SEAL Commander. The younger officer's eyes widened in disbelief, recognition dawning slowly. "Wait, you're..." He stopped, realizing that acknowledging it might save him from embarrassment, or it might not. The older officer looked equally shocked, finally seeing the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. Two identical men, both seemingly ordinary, but each holding a power that made ordinary authority meaningless. One was a captain of the police force, the other a Navy SEAL commander, twin brothers, and tonight they had just reminded the world why they were never to be underestimated. Marcus leaned back, voice calm, almost teasing. "Now, would you like to reconsider your approach?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Malcolm added, softly, "We're giving you a chance. Don't waste it." The officers, still grappling with their own disbelief, realized that walking away was not just the safer option, it was the only option. Slowly, uncomfortably, they stepped back toward the door, eyes flicking nervously between the twins. As they left, the bar exhaled. Patrons whispered, some laughing nervously, some staring in awe. The bartender, who had been hiding behind the counter, peeked out, realizing the magnitude of what had just happened. He had unintentionally sparked a confrontation with two of the most disciplined and capable men he could never hope to understand fully. Marcus and Malcolm remained seated, finishing their drinks as if nothing had happened, their calmness now a lesson in restraint and dominance. But even as the tension dissipated, both twins knew this was only the beginning. The city was vast, and trouble rarely stayed quiet for long. Their identities, though revealed to these officers, were still secrets to the rest of the world. And when the next challenge came, they would be ready, not as ordinary men, but as legends in their own right. The night had barely begun, yet the city already felt different for Marcus and Malcolm. They had walked out of the bar without incident, leaving the shaken officers behind, but neither twin relaxed. Danger had a way of following them, and tonight, it was only a matter of time before another storm arrived. They moved through the quiet streets with practiced ease, blending in with the late-night crowd, yet every step was calculated, every glance scanning for potential threats. Marcus's phone buzzed again, a secure message from his SEAL team. A high-profile criminal operation, one that threatened multiple city districts, had just been spotted. It was a mission that required precision, timing, and, most importantly, trust. He showed Malcolm the message briefly, and the subtle nod they exchanged spoke volumes. They would handle it together, as they always had. Twins, yes, but also a seamless team trained to operate under extreme pressure, with each understanding the other's thoughts without a word. The streets grew darker as they approached the rendezvous point, a small warehouse near the docks. The air smelled of salt and rust, and the distant hum of cargo cranes punctuated the night's quiet tension. Malcolm signaled a hand gesture, the kind only the two of them knew, and Marcus moved slightly ahead to survey the perimeter. Shadows shifted, and their instincts told them they weren't alone. It was subtle, but Marcus noticed footprints that didn't belong to dock workers, while Malcolm's trained eyes spotted faint reflections of flashlights bouncing off shipping containers. Someone was watching them, testing them. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. A criminal syndicate, unaware of the twins' true identities, had gathered, planning to move illegal weapons into the city. Security cameras were positioned strategically, and armed guards patrolled the area. To an outsider, it might have looked like a well-organized operation, but Marcus and Malcolm saw weaknesses, blind spots, and opportunities. Every military tactic Marcus had learned, every leadership skill Malcolm had honed, converged in this moment. They entered silently, slipping past guards with movements so precise that it seemed as though they were part of the shadows themselves. Marcus took the lead, disabling a guard with a non-lethal chokehold, while Malcolm neutralized another with expert hand-to-hand techniques he had mastered as a police captain. No one knew what hit them, yet every action was measured, controlled, and purposeful. The syndicate members, confident in their numbers, never even saw the storm approaching until it was too late. In the center of the warehouse, crates of weapons were stacked high, the smug satisfaction of the criminals filling the space with arrogance. That arrogance would be their downfall. Marcus and Malcolm moved with lethal efficiency, clearing the area systematically, covering each other's blind spots as though they were two halves of a single mind. Every guard they incapacitated, every weapon they secured, was another step toward dismantling the operation entirely. A sudden noise from above, a crate shifting, a guard alerting the others, sent the twins into split-second action. Marcus leapt to the side, narrowly avoiding a swinging metal bar, while Malcolm grabbed a firearm from a fallen guard, taking control of the situation before panic could set in. Their movements were a blur, a mix of military precision and police strategy, each complementing the other flawlessly. The syndicate, now fully aware of the threat, attempted to fight back, but they were outmatched. Marcus and Malcolm were not just skilled, they were unstoppable together. As the fight reached its peak, the twins cornered the syndicate's leader, a man known for his ruthlessness and cunning. He raised a weapon, but Marcus's calm hand, steady as a surgeon, disarmed him in a heartbeat. Malcolm's voice, authoritative and unwavering, commanded compliance. "You're done. Every move you make from here on is being watched." The leader's arrogance evaporated, replaced by disbelief and fear. He realized, too late, that he had underestimated the twins, not just as individuals, but as a unified force. Outside, city sirens grew louder. Local police, alerted by Malcolm earlier, had arrived to secure the perimeter. The twins stepped back into the shadows, observing as officers rounded up the criminals. Marcus allowed himself a brief smile, but it was tempered with awareness. The city's safety was never guaranteed. Malcolm approached him, voice low but satisfied. "That went smoother than I expected." Marcus chuckled softly. "Only because you didn't rush in like a hero. Patience wins the day." The subtle humor between them masked the intensity of the mission, a moment of calm amid chaos. Yet even as the criminals were escorted away, Marcus and Malcolm knew this was just one battle. The city was filled with threats, and their dual identities meant that they often had to operate in secrecy, letting others handle the aftermath while they prepared for the next challenge. That night had reminded them, once again, of the fine line they walked. One wrong decision could compromise everything, and their enemies were always watching. As dawn approached, the twins returned to their separate lives. Marcus would report to his SEAL team, debriefing on the mission's success, while Malcolm returned to the precinct, quietly noting details for follow-up investigations. Both were heroes, though the public would never know their names or the extent of their actions. Their identities remained a secret, a necessary precaution in a world that feared too much power in the hands of ordinary men. But the bond between them was undeniable. No one could match their coordination, their instincts, or their understanding of each other. Where one led, the other followed seamlessly, and together, they formed an unbreakable force. As they parted ways, each twin knew that their paths would soon converge again. Trouble never stayed away for long, and when it returned, they would face it together, unseen, unmatched, and unstoppable. That night, the city slept a little safer, unaware of the silent guardians who walked among them. Marcus and Malcolm, identical in appearance yet exceptional in every way, had proven that courage, skill, and unshakable confidence could turn the tide against chaos. And though their identities remained hidden from most, the city's underworld had learned an unforgettable lesson: never underestimate the twins. Days passed after the warehouse operation, but the tension never left Marcus and Malcolm. The city was a living entity, unpredictable and unforgiving, and threats often appeared where you least expected them. That afternoon, both twins attended separate commitments. Marcus with a covert briefing for an international operation, and Malcolm at a high-profile city council meeting addressing law enforcement strategies. But fate had a way of weaving its threads, and neither of them noticed the subtle surveillance cameras hidden in plain sight, recording movements and capturing faces for the wrong people. Later that evening, as the twins met at a neutral location, a quiet, upscale cafe far from the eyes of the public, they sensed the shift immediately. Marcus noticed a suspicious figure in the corner, seemingly absorbed in a newspaper, but clearly observing them. Malcolm's trained instincts confirmed it. The man had been tracking their movements for hours. It was subtle, but for the twins, nothing escaped notice. Their identities, though carefully concealed, were no longer completely safe. Someone had recognized them, or at least one of them, and this could unravel everything. As they sat down, the stranger made a bold move. He approached their table, a camera concealed in his jacket, phone ready, and the kind of smug arrogance that comes from thinking you've discovered a secret no one else knows. "I think you two might be more interesting than you appear," he said, a sly smirk playing across his face. Marcus and Malcolm exchanged a brief glance, their expressions calm but calculating. Neither reacted immediately, letting the man speak, assessing his intentions, reading his body language as a SEAL and a police captain would. "I have footage," the man continued, sliding his phone onto the table. "Warehouse incident. You're not just ordinary civilians, are you?" The words were bold, but the twins remained composed. Marcus leaned slightly forward, voice low, steady, and commanding. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said. "Do you understand who you're dealing with?" Malcolm mirrored him, tone polite but deadly serious. "One wrong move, and this will not end the way you think." The stranger froze for a fraction of a second. He had expected surprise, maybe denial, but not this calm, unshakable presence. Marcus's hand subtly brushed the edge of the table, a gesture small enough to seem casual but charged with unspoken warning. Malcolm's gaze held the man in place, silent but forceful. The atmosphere was tense, the cafe patrons oblivious to the quiet storm building in their midst. Finally, the man laughed nervously. "I mean no harm. I know what I saw, and I think the world deserves to know about it." Marcus tilted his head slightly, voice calm, almost amused. "The world? Or your own ambitions?" The man faltered. Malcolm leaned in, words smooth but commanding. "We are not interested in fame. What we do to protect people who will never know our names. And you, sir, would regret making us famous in any way." Realizing he had underestimated them, the man backed off, muttering an apology, slipping away before either twin could make a more permanent suggestion. Marcus and Malcolm exchanged a glance, a mixture of relief and acknowledgement. The city's shadows were full of curious eyes, and their identities, though partially exposed, were still safe, for now. But the encounter was a stark reminder. The world had layers, and danger didn't always announce itself with sirens or alarms. That night, as the twins walked through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting off puddles from an earlier rain, Malcolm spoke first. "We can't keep hiding forever. Sooner or later, someone will figure it out. Someone with resources, and with nothing to lose." Marcus nodded, the weight of truth settling over him. "We've managed so far because we move carefully, strike precisely, and trust no one outside our circle. But yes, eventually, exposure is inevitable. And when it comes, we'll be ready. Their conversation was interrupted by the faint buzz of Marcus's phone, a secure message flashing across the screen. He read it and passed it to Malcolm. The message was simple: emergency. Syndicate remnants regrouping. City in danger. Without hesitation, the twins moved with synchronized precision, navigating alleys and side streets to reach the new hotspot. Their teamwork was flawless, a dance of strategy, instinct, and trust. When they arrived, it was clear the threat was greater than before. The syndicate had learned from their previous defeat, fortifying their position with armed guards, traps, and surveillance. But Marcus and Malcolm didn't hesitate. Each assessed the scene with split-second calculation, identifying weaknesses and patterns. They communicated silently through subtle gestures, a language built over years of shared experience. Their combined expertise, a blend of military strategy and law enforcement tactics, made them a force that even seasoned criminals could not anticipate. Inside the compound, chaos erupted as they neutralized threats with precision. Guards were subdued, alarms disabled, and the syndicate leader forced into a corner. Marcus's hand movements were swift, deliberate, disarming weapons and creating paths of escape or control. Malcolm's voice, authoritative yet measured, commanded compliance, guiding the remaining hostiles without unnecessary force. Every action reinforced their unity. Every move demonstrated their unparalleled synergy. At the climax, the leader of the syndicate, now cornered and desperate, realized the truth. These were not ordinary men, nor were they mere legends whispered about in the underground. They were living proof that skill, intelligence, and discipline, combined with an unbreakable bond, could dismantle the most dangerous operations with ease. Fear, respect, and awe overtook arrogance. The leader dropped his weapon, surrendering completely. Outside, emergency services arrived, securing the area and evacuating civilians. Marcus and Malcolm melted into the night once again, leaving no trace, no recognition, just the lingering impression of order restored and justice served. As dawn approached, the twins paused on a rooftop, surveying the city they protected. The skyline glowed with promise and danger alike. Malcolm spoke softly, almost to himself. "Every day, it gets harder. But together, we can handle anything." Marcus nodded, the city reflecting in his eyes, calm but vigilant. "Always. No matter what comes, we face it together." The city was waking up to a new day, unaware that a silent battle had raged in its shadows overnight. Marcus and Malcolm, standing atop a rooftop overlooking the sprawling metropolis, felt the weight of the threats they had neutralized, but also the pull of challenges yet to come. Their twin bond was stronger than ever, forged through shared danger, training, and the knowledge that together they were unstoppable. But tonight, they would face their most personal test yet, a final confrontation that would decide not just their mission, but their very identities. Their intel had led them to an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. The syndicate, smart enough to learn from previous defeats, had regrouped and fortified their position. Armed guards, surveillance systems, and deadly traps awaited anyone daring enough to approach. Marcus and Malcolm paused briefly, their eyes scanning every shadow, every corner, every window. It wasn't fear that guided them. It was anticipation and the absolute certainty that they were the only ones capable of stopping the chaos. Without a word, they moved. Marcus took the lead, using his military expertise to disable surveillance cameras and silently incapacitate the first line of guards. Malcolm followed, coordinating movement, ensuring no threat could catch them off guard. Every step, every gesture was deliberate, a perfect symphony of lethal efficiency and tactical precision. The syndicate thought they were prepared, but they had never faced the combined force of a Navy SEAL commander and a police captain working in flawless unison. As they reached the central chamber, the syndicate leader appeared, flanked by heavily armed guards. "So, the twins come to play," he sneered, brandishing a weapon. "You think you can stop me?" Marcus stepped forward, voice calm but carrying the authority of someone who had stared death in the face countless times. "We don't think. We know." Malcolm moved to flank him, creating a pincer of absolute control. The battle that followed was swift and precise. Guards charged, but were neutralized with non-lethal efficiency. incapacitated by techniques Marcus and Malcolm had perfected over years. The syndicate leader attempted to flee, firing wildly, but Marcus's military precision and Malcolm's tactical strategy cornered him instantly. Every move they made was coordinated, instinctive, and flawless. Finally, the leader realized the futility of his situation. He dropped his weapon, breathing heavily, terror written across his face. Who are you really?" he demanded. Marcus leaned in slightly, voice steady. "You already know, but some things are better left understood than said aloud." Malcolm's gaze locked onto him, unyielding. "This city is under our watch. Your threats end here." The leader's arrogance evaporated, replaced by the bitter realization that he had underestimated two men who were far beyond ordinary, beyond comprehension even for the most seasoned criminals. Outside, city sirens heralded the arrival of law enforcement. Malcolm had alerted them earlier, ensuring the legal authority would be there to secure the criminals without exposing the twins' identities. Marcus and Malcolm stepped back into the shadows, leaving the authorities to handle the aftermath. No one saw them depart, yet their presence had already altered the course of events in ways the city would never know. As they reached a quiet alley to regroup, Malcolm finally broke the silence. "Every time we do this, I wonder if we'll ever get a normal life." Marcus smiled faintly, exhaustion and satisfaction in his eyes. "Normal is overrated. We've never had it, and we never will. But this is who we are. And together, nothing can touch us." Malcolm nodded, the unspoken bond between them stronger than words. They had faced danger, deception, and the curiosity of the world, and had emerged victorious, their identities intact, their mission complete. The twins walked through the early morning streets, the city slowly coming to life around them. They were unnoticed, unrecognized, yet they had changed the fate of the city in a way no one would ever fully understand. Marcus and Malcolm, identical in appearance yet unmatched in skill and intellect, were the invisible guardians of a world that never slept, ready to strike when chaos threatened peace. Back at their respective stations, Marcus returning to his SEAL operations, Malcolm to his precinct, they prepared for the day ahead. The city moved oblivious to the dangers it had narrowly escaped, while the twins remained vigilant, their bond unbreakable, their purpose unwavering. They were brothers, warriors, and protectors, the perfect combination of strength, strategy, and stealth. That night, as the city finally rested under a blanket of stars, the twins reunited briefly on the same rooftop where it had all begun. Marcus spoke first, voice calm, almost whispering to the wind. "We did it. Again." Malcolm smiled, his gaze scanning the horizon. "We always will, as long as we trust each other." They clasped hands briefly, a silent promise that no challenge, no threat, could ever break their unity. And so, the city slept safely, unaware of the heroes walking among them. Marcus and Malcolm, the black twins who had faced threats from law enforcement, criminals, and the world itself, remained shadows in the night. Captain and commander, united in purpose, unstoppable in action, and untouchable in identity. Their story was not one of fame or recognition, but of courage, loyalty, and unmatched skill, a testament to what it means to protect those who will never know your name. For now, the city was at peace, but Marcus and Malcolm knew better than anyone that peace was temporary. Danger would return, as it always did. And when it did, the twins would be ready, moving as one, unseen and invincible, proving once again that true power lies not in recognition, but in the ability to act when the world needs it most. If you enjoyed watching how these unstoppable twins handled danger and shocked the city, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more unbelievable stories like this. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.